Hello, once again, welcome at 5 Minutes with Errol Musk. I'm Anneke, clinical psychologist, and I just want to ask you, Errol. There's many articles saying that Elon's life in South Africa was miserable. Would you like to comment on that?
Yes, I mean, there are many articles which quote him as saying my life in South Africa was miserable.
Yeah.
Yes, I have seen some of those articles, and my first response to that would be to say, well, that's nonsense. But there is something I should add, and that is that as a youngster, he had a wonderful time. And apart from the fact that we have wonderful holiday resorts here, and we went overseas regularly, I took him with me overseas regularly, and so on. He was able to see the world. He had everything he liked in South Africa. His motorbikes, and then he loved his computer, and he had many friends. And this was when he was, let's say, a preteen, and getting into the teenage years, we're all right at first, but as he got a little older, we actually moved from an English-speaking area to Pretoria, so that he could go to Pretoria Boys High School, where I wanted him to finish, where he did the majority of his high schooling. And Pretoria at the time was a largely English-speaking, I beg your pardon. Pretoria at the time was a largely Afrikaans or South African Dutch-speaking community. And for people who know about South Africa, they will know that for 200 years there have been two white groups in South Africa, one called the English group and the other group the Afrikaans group. Now, for 200 years, unlike other countries that have had mixed immigration, in South Africa that hasn't happened. They have stayed apart. They stayed apart, almost like Moses divided the Red Sea. So at the time, it has changed. It has changed since we are a multiracial country. And so that's a bonus. So today, the Afrikaans people and the English people are a little closer together. Not much, a little bit. But at the time that Elon was a young teen and becoming, getting on to like 14, 15, 16 and so on, and, the interest in, say girls starts to come up, we were living in Pretoria. Now, to give you an example, I married an Afrikaans girl as a second wife some 10 years after I was divorced from Elon's mother. She was Afrikaans, as I said, and her whole family, and she was from a sort of quite an impressive family. Her family were all up in arms about the fact that she's marrying an Englishman. And they made no bones about it. They told me straight to my face. They told me they're not coming to the wedding. I said, oh, well, don't come then. But that is the circumstances that we had even as recently as 1992 when I married. Afrikaans girls are not supposed to marry the Englishmen. And the Englishmen do not take out Afrikaans girls. It's as simple as that. And it's really ridiculous because in my own case, both my grandmothers happen to be South African Dutch, Huguenots descent, obviously Huguenot descent. But so that makes me somewhat, and Elon for that matter, somewhat South African Dutch himself, or Afrikaans himself, partly. But so that when Elon got to the time of, sort of meeting girls in Pretoria, there were no girls to meet. It was almost impossible to meet a girl, and certainly could not meet an Afrikaans girl because they simply would not. You were considered an Englishman. That meant you were from Britain. Didn't mean you were an English-speaking South African. means you're an Englishman, Engelsman, which is no good. They call them Engelsman, redneck, you see. So Elon and Kimball, for that matter, Kimball, just as much as Elon, beautiful looking boys. They had many male friends, but very few female friends. And this was very frustrating, very frustrating for both of them. Elon was most frustrated about it because he's a red-blooded boy. And I recall on trips overseas, for example, where things were easier, how much he enjoyed the free flow of talk in places that we went to where other people were, and that, you know, he couldn't, it was quite surprising to find women actually prepared to speak to you and not turn their head away when they see you. And so when he went to university initially in North America, he was immediately confronted by a community which consisted of 50-50 men and women, and very many attractive men and women. And very soon he found himself to be very popular and very happy in the situation. And I noticed on my many trips, I mean, as soon as I started, I went there as often as I could, you know, perhaps every 6 months, or maybe at least every 9 months. And I couldn't help but noticing how much Elon had changed from being at university there, and how happy he was. And I put that down to the fact that you could actually meet girls, and which is so important to boys of that age. I mean, it becomes everything, you know, it becomes like everything to them. And schoolwork and all that is important, but boy, do you need to meet a girl. And there he found what he wanted, and that made him very happy. And unfortunately, he didn't have that here. And for that reason, I can fully understand why he says that his time here was miserable. He's referring to the time that he was a young teenager.
Thank you very much, Errol.